Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan everyone for attending. And we have another event for our Discover Islam Week. And today we have Brother Kashif May. And I'm going to hand it over to Anayat to introduce her.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Jazakallah Brother Kashif for attending our event today. Before we start, I'd just like to give a little introduction about Brother Kashif May. Brother Kashif May is a revert for over 20 years and now living in Birmingham. Brother Kashif May is a former teacher of religious studies at Al Furqan Secondary School and has worked at alternative provision schools for excluded children for many years. Brother Kashif May is a khatib at Al Furqan Masjid, delivering talks on religious guidance. Let's get Brother Kashif on now.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Alaikum rahmatullah, everyone. Brother Knight asked me, and it seems like yesterday, Brother Knight, and it was weeks ago. Can you believe that? When you asked me, it's like 4 weeks ago. I thought, oh, I've got forever, and I was still making some notes today. Anyway, he wanted me to talk about my journey to Islam. I hope it'll be of some interest. I mean, we've all got a story, and I don't think perhaps my story is different, but my journey would be the same as everybody else. So I don't know who's online, whether it's just Muslims or non-Muslims, but I'm available for questions and answers later. I've made some notes here, so forgive me if sometimes my eyes goes down. It's just looking at little prompts I've given myself to take through this talk. I'll make a start then on my amazing journey to Islam. I did want to talk first about stereotypes, because I hope it doesn't glitch on me either, because one thing you always find, this idea that kind of religious people are kind of nutty people or crazy people. But, I've met many people over the years, Muslims, Hindu, Christians, who are sincere to their religion. They're just better people trying to do the right thing. And, for myself, I've met many people over the years. I've worked with people, and many people don't even know I'm Muslim. I've got no need to tell them I'm Muslim. I don't see the point of that. I'm just happy being Muslim. I'm happy being just good to people and trying to be a better person. So I think there's, this stereotype that Muslims especially want to be fanatics, always got to be talking about their religion. That's not the case. I've met many good people, religious people, whether they be, as I said, Muslim or non-Muslim. The other stereotype is one I want to kind of quash today. You always see in the news and the media that every revert, especially every black revert, is somebody who's just got out of prison or was a gangster. But I've not been to prison. And my brother, he's a Muslim, hadn't been to prison. I've got friends, none of them been to prison, just normal people who, have got families, they've been to university, they've got jobs. So this idea that if somebody's led that lifestyle and they come away and become Muslim, alhamdulillah for that. But it's not something that's usual for people to have led that kind of lifestyle to want to become Muslim. So I want to make a start on how and why I became Muslim. I'm going to start with the why, because the why is a lot easier to explain, I think, than the how. The how is a kind of an overview. How I became Muslim and why I became Muslim, they're very connected, but the why is important, and it may be the same reasons that many of the Muslims are listening in have the same reasons why they are Muslim. But when I was a non-Muslim and I had a Christian upbringing in the church, so I wasn't new to the idea of God, but I don't think I was totally convinced about the idea of God. I just went along with it. My mum used to send us to Sunday school every week, so it's something that we had to do. It's not something I hated, it's just something we accepted as part of growing up. But as I did get older, I had a lot of questions about life and existence. People kind of peddle this lie that you'll never know the truth about why we're here, or it's some kind of accident. There's no reason to why we're here, and I never used to accept that. And one of the things we have been blessed with, we've got this intellect, this ability to think and reason. And I think that's one of the things that human beings don't often do. Unfortunately, they don't reason and they don't like to think deeply. So, anybody who uses their common sense And let's take religion out of it for the minute. If you just use your common sense and reason and look at the reality of the universe, look at the reality of life on the earth, it's easy to see that there's a reality behind everything. You haven't got to look for a religious reason first. You've got to accept that, you know, there's something causing everything to happen. So, you know, this notion of God is not something that I rejected, but I never thought God was the answer for this reality, strangely enough. For those that are listening in anyway, I'll tell you something. The kind of reasons that I had of why I wanted to become Muslim actually summed up in an ayah in the Quran. If you don't mind me reading it, this is from Surah Baqarah, and it's ayah 164. And it's a beautiful ayah. And if anything will tell you why I became Muslim in this ayah, I've tried to give it the nearest meaning in English. It's where Allah says in the Quran, He says, "Behold, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, and the ships that sail on the ocean for the benefit of mankind, in the rain which God Himself sends down from the skies, by which He gives life to an earth that without this rain would be completely dead, in all the creatures of all the different kinds you see scattered throughout the earth, and even in the wind that blows the clouds through the sky. These are signs for people to think." And, you know, if ever there's an ayah, you know, it's that ayah, you know, it's thinking about the reality that really caused me to ask these questions. You know, where did all this come from and what am I doing here? I remember back in my late 20s, that's quite a while ago, but I didn't become Muslim till I was 31, by the way. So, you know, I became Muslim, I'd say quite late on. Alhamdulillah, I'm one of the fortunate ones, didn't have to pray till I was 31. But back then I used to do, in my 20s, I used to do what I do now. I like to go down to the gym, lift some weights. And I remember I used to buy a lot of magazines. One of the magazines used to be my favorite, used to be a magazine called Flex magazine. It used to feature articles by the weightlifters of the day. Some you'd know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously, you know, Dorian Yates from Birmingham, well-known bodylifter. I'm trying to think of some others. Lee Haney would be one, Lee Priest, a lot of names you might not know, but they did a particular article that I remember reading when I was perhaps about 27, 28. And it was about muscle size, what causes muscles to grow. And it was a kind of a scientific argument about the muscles grow because it's a defense mechanism by the body. That when you lift weights, it causes tears in the muscle and the muscle reacts by thinking the body is under attack. So it starts to build new muscle. Now, when I read that, I just found that astonishing. It's funny, you know, I'm here many years later, remembering the article and just thinking to myself, how is that even possible that the muscle can grow? Because that shows intelligence. And I was thinking to myself then, what could possibly cause muscle to grow? Because you have proteins, the amino acids, the molecules, and they're all composed of something else. There must be a point at which there is intelligence. Do you understand my argument? Because the molecules are made of atoms. The atoms of themselves are made of protons, electrons, and neutrons, which are then made of something else. And I thought to myself, well, where does the intelligence part actually begin to make the muscle grow? So it was questions like that, asking myself questions, you know, what is causing all this to happen? So that article is just one of many articles I used to read back then that really got me thinking deeply about whether we have a purpose on this planet. And, you know, one of the amazing things I went through then, and, you know, I've not experienced anything like it, you know, like it afterwards, is kind of a spiritual awakening where your mind starts to question the reality around you. And I wasn't looking for God at that time. I was just looking for answers to fundamental questions like, where do we come from? What will happen to me when I die? What's the purpose of man? Is there a purpose for man? So I wasn't looking for God. I think there's sometimes this idea that when you're looking for these answers, where do we come from? You jump straight into religion. I didn't do that. I really was making a serious search to find out what, if anything, were the answers to the meaning of life. And I remember thinking deeply about it, just sometimes I just used to hit a blank wall. If you think about that, that is really difficult to take when you're trying to find an answer to something and all you can draw is a blank. It's really actually quite frustrating. But I didn't have any answers. So amazingly at the time, it's around this time, funny enough, that was the why I wanted to become Muslim. Now, the how I became Muslim, I'll give a brief overview. I suppose it's not easy to answer. The idea of God's not new. I'll say this. I made some notes here. I want to hope you're listening to this. You know, this is something perhaps a lot of people who are young people listening, I'm talking to people perhaps at uni, you won't appreciate till you're a lot older. You find that when you get old, you do change, you change. And one of the things, you do become wiser, and the things you did in the past, the mistakes you made, you don't make them again because you've become wiser. Sometimes it takes a long time for that wisdom to set in, but setting it should. But the point I'm trying to make is that the person I was at 20 is not the person I was at 30, and not the person I was at 40, and certainly not now. You know, I've reached 50 and beyond. I'm certainly not the same person I was even 10 years ago. You keep changing and you become wiser. And what you should do is learn from your mistakes. And so, and this is important as well, you've got to be a person who's willing to change. You know, over the years, I've got friends who see me become Muslim. They're impressed by the way of life I'm living, but they're unable to change the way that they're living their life, which is a shame. So you've got to be somebody who's willing to change their life and change their life for the better. So I learned from my mistakes in the past. And as I said, the problem is a lot of people don't want to change, but I was very fortunate. I went to the house of a friend and he'd become Muslim. He wasn't actually that serious about the religion, actually. But he showed me a film that many of you might know called The Message. The Message is kind of a Hollywood movie about the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions. But actually, if you watch it, and he just got me to watch it all the way through, it's about 3 hours long, but he got me to watch it and he kept pointing out points that were important that I didn't actually realize what Islam was. I didn't actually realize the connection of the Prophet Muhammad to Prophet Jesus, Prophet Isa ibn Maryam, and the relationship, obviously, Jesus to Moses. I didn't realize that Judaism, the Jews, Christianity, the Christians, Islam and the Muslims were all connected in the same religion. I never realized that all my life. I'd never been one to really explore other religions. At school, it was just a Christian school. We never really delved that much into the other religions. So I just thought, hearing about Islam, Islam was just the same religion as Sikhism and Hinduism. And so he showed me the film, The Message, and he told me to go and buy a Quran. And that's how it started, how I became a Muslim. So at the outset, I remember this, I thought, this Islam, it's a good religion, but I don't want to be Muslim. It's a good religion. I was, 27, 28 at the time, and I was living my social life. And that social life, it wasn't a gangster life, it's just normal social life, clubbing, you know, girlfriends. I didn't want that. Why would I want that to come to an end? Why? So I thought, yeah, I'll explore this Islam. I don't mind reading about it, doing the background research, but I'm enjoying my life as it is. I'm happy, very happy as I am. So that's an important thing. I made a note here as well, you know, everyone's got a different story, but I think everybody kind of has a similar journey. And I'd say to anyone, if you have friends who are interested in Islam, don't be the focal point for them. Tell them to go away if they're really interested and do their own research. I became Muslim in 1996. That's 4 years after hearing about Islam. That's 4 years of doing research. That means I didn't research all the time, but sometimes I would pick up the Quran or pick up something about Islam, learn something, then just put it down again and go on living my life. And I did that for 4 years. And I thought that, you know, looking back, that was good for me. That worked for me. I think often Muslims have this idea that when you talk to somebody about Islam, they should accept it straight away. For me, it took 4 whole years, 4 years of doing my own research. So in that time, what I started to do, I was comparing the life that Islam was telling me to live against the life that I was living. And one thing I do like about the Quran, it's an argument for the existence of God. And I said this time was a time of enlightenment. So I used to ask myself this serious question, really, does God exist? And how could he exist? So I used to look at what the Islam said about God. And then I used to think deeply about it. Does God exist? And could he exist? Is there something behind this universe, something that's infinite? Can something be infinite? And these are, really fundamental questions that I think somebody has to go through that process of enlightenment before you can be truly convinced about any religion. And that's why sometimes I'm a bit, I don't think critical. I'm not too bothered about people who are critical of religion anyway. I mean, I'm kind of past that. But the idea that we haven't thought deeply about God, first of all, that we haven't looked at these arguments. Does God exist? Doesn't God exist? Could science be true? Could science be false? Could we be a cosmic accident? The idea that we don't think about these questions and weigh them up and weigh up the solutions, that kind of irks me sometimes. But, we're all human beings, and I suppose variety, they say, is the spice of life. So what happened? Basically, my journey, I stopped liking the person that I was, the person that that was non-Muslim. I stopped liking that person. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, I'm going to give an overview. I could go on and on about things that I did, that I regret. But I want to point out my life as a non-Muslim is not something that, well, I do regret it actually, but yeah, but I've got to be careful the way I say it, because you might say someone who's non-Muslim. It was an important part of my life. It was an important part. And I would not be here today if I'd not gone through those 30 years of being a non-Muslim and doing the things I did. And it's funny, now being a Muslim. A friend told me when I became Muslim, a Muslim friend told me that you're going to forget what it's like being a non-Muslim. And I can only talk about myself. I'm not generalizing about any person who's non-Muslim, but I have a lot of sadness and regret about the time I was a non-Muslim, a lot of sadness and regret. Look, I always say this to my own children. Look, anyone can go clubbing. Anyone can get a girlfriend. Anyone can smoke weed. Anyone can get drunk. Anyone can do these things. It's not difficult to do these things. The idea that somebody who doesn't want to do these things is weak-minded, that's not even a logical argument. So, it's funny, it's looking back. I know there may be people on here who heard me say this before. I'm envious of people who were born into Islam, envious that those people may never have had a relationship other than marriage. And but I think about that every day. If that's one thought that comes back to me every single day, it's the fact that I was engaged in any kind of relationships outside of Islam. You might think that's just, part of my past life, but you live it. Unfortunately, what you'll find, and you can speak to any revert Muslim, and I do speak to revert Muslims, they say the same thing as me. Their life and their memories of the past is nothing but regret for wasted time, all those wasted years. So I became Muslim when I became convinced, and it's amazing when I think about it. I was convinced, and it came to a day where I said, right, that's it. I used to smoke. I stopped on that day. I used to drink. I stopped on that day. Clubbing. I stopped on that day. Relationships. I stopped everything. I stopped it all in one day because I was totally convinced. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed in becoming Muslim on this journey is that I now have a relationship with God. And there's a reason now, being a Muslim, that I want to be a better person. And also, obviously, as Muslims, we believe in the day of judgment, obviously this day of accountability. And we know that life is just a test. One thing I will say, You know, I look at my past, and I suppose everything happened for a reason. I became a Muslim at that particular time for a reason, and it couldn't have been brought forward. There were times I actually did want to go and speak to some Muslims about Islam, because at the time, around 1993, I used to live in Birmingham, and at that particular time, there was a Saddam Hussein mosque, which I used to live near in Peri-Bar, and I used to see the Muslims going in. I used to just want to go and ask them, just to ask them about the religion, but I was just too afraid. So I just left it, and it was the qadr of Allah, the fate that depicted that I wouldn't become Muslim until 1996. One thing I do want to say, and it's this. Now, look, I spent 2 years at university living with someone who was a Muslim, so-called Muslim. I won't give his name. This is a long time ago. He may well have changed. God be on his side and God guide him. But, you know, I would say this, and you should remind any Muslim who doesn't know anything about Islam, if you don't know anything about Islam, keep quiet. Just keep quiet. He didn't know anything about Islam, and I never saw him pray. That's why, you know, when I became Muslim, I have to thank God I didn't know any Muslims really apart from him, and he just sent me sideways. I used to think that the Prophet was a Pakistani because he didn't know anything about the religion. I never saw him reading the Quran except in Ramadan. And when I used to ask him, what does it mean? He says, oh, never you mind, never you mind. It's not for you. This is our culture. And he made the religion into something ugly. So I just thought Islam was just something that is, oh, it must be related to what Sikhs do. It must be related to what Hindus do. I had no idea. He really sent me sideways. So I would say this, you know, if you're going to be a representative of Islam and talk about Islam, at least know something about the religion and don't put people off. You know, I mean, unfortunately, many Muslims, they put people off the religion. So that kind of is a big overview of my journey to Islam. It's been an amazing journey. I think I've been quite privileged, somebody who's been blessed. Obviously, I became Muslim. My brother became Muslim. My father became Muslim and died 5 weeks later. For those of you who don't know, my mother became Muslim only, a year and a half ago, and died after 3 hours. So, you know, I've been blessed in everything, basically. So what I'd like to do is perhaps open the floor now. I hope I've discussed enough about why I became Muslim, my journey to Islam, and open it up to any question and answers that people might have. So I hope you've got some questions and answers for me, you know, some questions for me.
Jazakallah khairan for that really inspiring story. I think I can say for myself, I don't really interact too much with reverts, so I don't really hear many stories. But hearing one from you is really inspiring to see the journey that you went through. And I think, yeah, that balance between understanding that you have regrets in your past, but knowing that that past was a part of your journey to Islam, I think is really an amazing way that you put it. So inshallah, if we have any questions for the brother, then put it in the chat and I'll read it out for him. So we have one question. It says, what inclined you to become a Muslim and revert to Islam when you believed Islam, Judaism and Christianity are so similar? Why did you choose Islam? Why did Islam stand out to you specifically?
You know something, I think this is one of the beauties of just having a clear mind and a clear approach to Islam. When I watched the film The Message, that film is about the character of the Prophet. If there's one thing that's convinced me that Islam is the truth, it's that man. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him.
Ameen.
When you read about his character, and I learned his character just from a 3-hour film, some of the hadith he said in that film about the religion of Islam, where to the nearest meaning, the Arab is not better than the non-Arab. The black is not better than the white, nor the white better than the black, except in his relationship with God. That really struck a chord with me. And there were other things in that film. If anybody's seen The Message, you will understand. There were some things in that film that just blew my mind. One of the hadith of the Prophet that was mentioned in the film is a Muslim that goes to bed with his stomach full when his brother's stomach is empty. That's not a Muslim. You know, growing up, I grew up with this kind of black nationalism because my parents are from Jamaica. and here in England. So I kind of was on that black power vibe for a long time, wanted to belong to something, thinking that black people were superior, Africa was superior, that we were the better race. When I heard this talk about a black is not better than white, white is not better than black, I knew that was true. I knew that was true, and I'd never heard it before or practiced like Islam, because one of the things that the Muslims have that I don't really see other religions have. I mean, I may be wrong, you know, I mean, the other religions may come and argue the point, but the prayer where you stand next to each other and you're standing next to somebody who can be a totally different nationality, totally different culture, and you're standing next to him like a brother. That's what really inclined me towards Islam rather than Christianity.
Jazakallah khairan. So we have another question that says here, as a new Muslim, would you recommend reading the Quran in English or learning Arabic in order to understand the Quran in its truest form?
Listen, here's the secret. I went out and bought this from W.H. Smith, this Yusuf Ali. I didn't know any Arabic, so I just read in English. This Quran has the English and the Arabic and the tafsir. So for many years, I just read the English. I read the English, I read the English, I read the English. I must have read this maybe 1,000 times, maybe 1,000 times. But the secret is, I now know whenever a surah is played in Arabic, I know it in English already. I know the content of Surah Baqarah, Surah Imran, Surah Ma'idah, Nisa, Yusuf, Surah Sabah, Azab. I know them completely in English because I've read the English so many times. So when I hear the Arabic played, I know, this is Surah Muhammad, or it's Surah Dhariyat, because I already learned the English and I've learned the Arabic words that connect to the English. So I would tell people, you need to learn the meaning, learn the English, read in English. Once you know all the content and the themes of the Quran in English, I mean, I wouldn't tell people not to learn Arabic, that's important. But I think sometimes this idea that we shouldn't learn the Quran in the Arabic, the language that we already know, I think that's completely wrong. The easiest way, I think, to learn the Quran throughout is to learn it in the language that you already know. For me, that was English.
Jazakallah khairan. So another question is, you mentioned this bit already, but what are some take-home points for spreading the word of Islam successfully as a Muslim?
Well, easy. Your character. Your character. Without doubt, when I said I've been blessed because when I came to Islam, I was surrounded by good Muslims. But I know people who become Muslim and they've left because they were surrounded by bad people. It's character. There's nothing better than having a good character. That doesn't mean we're perfect. I'm far, far from perfect. But as I said, the older you get, the wiser you get. You really do start to look at your deficiencies and stop looking at the faults of other people. Your character. Really work on your Islamic character. That is the best way. As I said, if someone can see you and they know you're Muslim, you don't have to tell somebody Muslim. Let's assume that somebody just finds out you're a Muslim, but they see that you're always a person who speaks the truth, who always does good. You don't try and cheat people. You're not a hypocrite, meaning you talk a good Islam, but on the side, you're always smoking and drinking and you've got girlfriends on the side or boyfriends on the side. They see that you are somebody who's truthful. And they see you're somebody who can take criticism of your religion and it's water off a duck's back. Good character. That's the thing that's going to change people's heart.
Jazakallah khairan. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any other questions, but if there's is there anything that you'd like to share just to close this off, inshallah?
No, thank you very much for inviting me in. I mean, I don't really think there's much to say. I think there's something that's coming from, is that Zainab? Zainab's just answered.
Oh yes, there's just one last question and we'll end with this, inshallah. So after you reverted, did you ever receive any backlash and how did you deal with it?
No, not from my family. My family saw the way I was before. I wasn't a gangster, but I was a bit of a rebel, and they saw a complete change. I saw somebody who was really serious about the religion. I was very, very fortunate. Those years I spent researching convinced me that Islam was in truth. I was convinced that when I became Muslim, I took it seriously. I learnt my prayers within 30 days.
Alhamdulillah.
And I'm so grateful. I have never missed my prayers in all those years, in over 20 years. And I always pray in the masjid. I've just been fortunate that when I became Muslim, I took it seriously. So it wasn't a backlash. The criticism I get from people, I don't mind. I mean, I had some friends who were my close friends I grew up with. They can see I was sincere. But the ones who, my friends later in life, they used to laugh at me, think I was stupid. They didn't laugh at me when I was going clubbing, doing all these stupid things with them. But they laughed at me when I said, no, I don't want to go clubbing. I don't want to become intoxicated. I want to do better for myself. That tells you yourself that you're following something that's true.
If you don't mind, there is just one last question.
I don't mind.
Okay. When it comes to regrets, how did you overcome that?
I don't, unfortunately. You just have to live with it. I mean, I don't let shaitan get to me, but believe me, there's not a day, not one day goes by. Oh God, I might become tearful, but there's not a day goes by you don't become regretful. Unfortunately, that's just something you've got to live with, unfortunately.
Allah,
and every revert's unfortunately the same. You just have a lot of regrets, unfortunately. You did a lot of stupid things, said a lot of stupid things, did a lot of stupid things. Unfortunately, you just got to live with it. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
May Allah reward you and keep you safe. And Jazakallah khairan for your time. We really appreciate you sharing your story and being so honest with us.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Take care.